Moved by John, seconded by Steve. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. Okay, the next item, public comment. Seeing no one from the public is here. We'll move on to item 6, which is the discussion and approval on the highway department's asphalt plant repairs and upgrades. This is coming to the committee via the highway committee, recommending some serious upgrades and repairs at the committee. Jesse is here from the highway committee. If you want to just touch on this a little bit, but it seems pretty self-explanatory as far as the issues that are at hand. There's also going to be a representative from energy engineering or motion engineering, I'm sorry, at the April 11th meeting to discuss this specific issue. But we're looking to move this from the finance committee and recommend this to the county board to do these upgrades. Jesse, do you want to just touch on this a little bit?
So in the past, we've had a contractor doing majority of our repairs that we're not able to handle on our own at the hot mix plant. Over the last few years, we've been having a few issues, a few question marks on that contractor. So we started looking around, finding a different contractor, talked with other counties, other hot mix plants. And actually our old commissioner Todd Every ran into this motion engineering down at a conference. I believe Gary might have ran into him also. Looking to help us do some improvements. And last year we had a stack test, emissions test that we have to do every year at our hot mix plant, and we ended up failing it last year. So this motion engineering also handles parts and pieces for updating the plants. They handled our bags for our bag house that we needed to change out in order to try and pass this stack test. So started working with them on that. In those conversations, we started moving forward with asking more questions, having upgrades. So we actually scheduled a meeting, had the motion engineering company come up and take a look at our plant. Ended up finding out they used to do work at our plant years ago. The owner's father owned the company, obviously retired. In that transition, they lost some of their contacts for counties with hot mix plants. So we walked through the whole plant, started going through some of the upgrades that have been done over the last few years by this previous consultant that we had, and found a lot of defaults in what that contractor did for us. Found out he implemented a computer program system that controls our whole plant, that was made and configured on his own thought process, not a universal program. So we were actually at the mercy of him being the only one that can diagnose problems. We actually got to the point of we weren't even able to start our plant unless he's there with his laptop plugged in. So we started talking with this motion engineering. They recommended a program that's universal worldwide. They had 3 different programs, but this is the most universal. We can talk to any other company. They can come in, plug in, tell us what's wrong. If we end up getting connected to internet, Wi-Fi, they can actually diagnose a lot of the problems right from their office, which is in Kenosha. I'd be able to sit at my desk in my office, pull up our hot mix plant on my computer screen and see if they're running, how much tonnage they're running, if there's any issues, everything right from my desk. So we walked through all the estimates. We knew of a couple other estimates that we had coming from Aztec, which is a company out of Texas and Tennessee that had did our drum replacement back in 2006. And they've helped us with a few things, but obviously with them out of Texas, it's been usually a scheduling issue. This motion engineering is able to help us with all of the work, pretty much top to bottom. So I asked for estimates for everything. Broke down all the estimates so that we could have the discussion at highway. Went through all that, and then as Chairman Tom Rondon commented, they will be here on next Thursday, basically to explain everything that they gave me estimates on. The other counties I talked to have been working with this company. I've had very good luck with them. They're actually at Sheboygan County this year, putting up their brand new plant, which they purchased from Motion Engineering. And disassembling their old plant and moving it to Marquette County. So they go from maintenance right up to a brand new plant, installing, taking down, put up a new plant. So they're well diversed in this area of expertise. It's a very, very specialized, which we've been finding out, like I said, with our previous contractor, of writing a program himself and not making it universal and having a lot of deficiencies in that program. So we're looking at trying to get this plant up and running, creating a better mix, passing our stack tests with the DNR, stay compliant, and also hopefully in the long run, lower our costs up front per ton, that maybe we can start gaining a little bit more work back from townships and help get our hot mix plant back to where it used to be. This has been a very long process that has been kind of overlooked. We ran some numbers. Ladies and office ran some numbers. So our hot mix plant is a 1986 model. We can only go back to the last 10 years. Obviously you couldn't find records from much from before that. Maintenance wise, we stuck about 19% maintenance wise into that plant over the course of time. We're just shy of $600,000 we stuck into it. So brand new plant of our size is just over 3 million. $600,000 in just about 40 years is not much of a maintenance upkeep on a plant with as many moving parts as what it has. We're looking at about $350,000 worth of upgrades right now this year. Obviously we know there'll be a few more we have in the future, but this is what we need in order to get the plant up and running, that we can actually have production this year. We've finagled a few things around. We're able to make it work, taking money right out of our internal service fund. So I hope if there's any other questions, I'll try and answer them. I ask for the blessing of the finance committee to pass it to county board.
Do you have any comments on that?
By doing this upgrade, that might help. By doing this upgrade here now, we're gonna be able to run recycled material, which we couldn't do before. And almost all hot mix companies run recycled material. So this will make us more competitive. Like we said, we'll probably, for the towns, counties, villages, we can compete with the price. So hopefully this will be a good investment.
Yep.
So do we actually run the plant with like a profit loss? Do we have numbers do we track it that way as a department? So we know historically, like Jesse was saying, we haven't put any money back into it. So is that money just being put into the general fund? Where's the profit going, or we're just never been making profit?
I guess a general answer, if you look at the annual audit from the county, and the highway department has an individual audit annually, that as far as I know, for the past 6-7 years, they've always addressed that in the audit where it says this operation within the highway department is basically not doing well because the revenue generated is much less than the expenses that are put into it on an annual basis. So by upgrading this would change that profit and loss within that department. It would make that operation of that plant much more efficient, thus enabling it to generate income rather than basically lose money on an annual basis. The specific numbers I can't tell you right now. I could look in the audits, but they're in there.
I was just generally speaking, so.
Yeah, so I'll find it here, but the Highway Enterprise Fund has a cost pool specifically for the asphalt plant, and it's reported in here someplace. This is last year's. Right now, the audit for 2023 is happening as we speak. This would be for 2022.
One of the, there aren't a lot of comments on the audit of the highway department annually. It's generally, the auditors say this is, it's a well-run operation. It's doing fine. The only thing that they annually, they talk about is the specific revenue and expense within that asphalt plant operation. And this is gonna obviously turn that around completely and make it more efficient and also more competitive in the market.
And obviously, the more tonnage we put out, the more profit we make because we can keep our price down. The guys are there regardless. So if we can keep that plant running and produce more blacktop, there's been years that we have come out very well by doing a lot of blacktopping through some grant work and stuff. So we have, it's been competitive. Maybe not every year.
The other thing it's going to allow is not only to maintain the county highway system at a, when we do the work, it's going to be less money to maintain the system, but also, as has been said, to be competitive with the village, towns and cities as far as any work that we would do within those areas. There's a narrative that was within the packet outlining all the costs that make up the 350,000. I don't know if everybody looked at that, but maybe I can just run through it. One of the things, replacing the drum liner at $70,000, replacing a gas valve at $6,000. There's a burner control system upgrade of $38,000. A feed scale at $46,000 and change. A control computer screens and scale screen output, that would be $18,000. Basically replacing and upgrading the rest of the computer system at $49,000. And then the labor estimated to do all this work is $121,000, coming down to a total of $350,000. The funds to do this will come from basically from the capital improvement fund. There was supposed to be a grader in the 24 budget that was going to be replaced, but that would be delayed. And the 350,000 that was assigned to the grader replacement would be used to upgrade it and do the repairs on the asphalt plant. And then the capital improvement plan would have to be have to be looked at and changed. But there is funds available, and this has been recommended by the Highway Committee to the Finance Committee, and now we have to move it from the Finance Committee to the County Board.
What do we expect the life expectancy then of the plant? If it's 40 years old, and we hear this all the time, it seems that, it's exceeded its life expectancy or whatever, and I believe in fixing and repairing and maintaining things as long as we can versus just throwing it out and getting new. But I'm just curious, with these upgrades and with the technology that's being implemented these days, how many years do we expect this to get us out of this plant?
Probably another at least 40 to 50 years.
Really?
Yeah. What we had, and from this motion engineering and also from our new commissioner, Marty Tremmel, he's been around hot mix plants throughout the country. He was shocked when he came to our plant for the tour of how good a shape our plant is in. That was also one thing motion engineering had commented on, is that as a whole, the main structure of the plant is in very good shape. It's the wear parts
Excuse me.
is the issue right now.
Milt?
How many ton or yards do you make through this plant in an average year, and what do you kind of expect to make through it after these repairs? Is there a number at all?
Over the course of the last few years, we've been averaging between 12 to 18,000 tons of asphalt through this plant. We're hoping with the upgrades and hopefully been able to lower our cost per ton. We're hoping that we can bump that up to at least 25 to 30,000.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this, Milt?
Now, is the paver and your other equipment for laying the blacktop all in excellent shape, very good shape, or is there needs any repairs or any updates to that process, sir?
So the paver was purchased brand new in 2008. So that machine is also similar to the hot mix plant, obviously lots of wear parts that we maintain every year. As a whole, that's in great shape. Our hot mix rollers have just been updated over the last 5 years. We purchased one year and one next year. So the core equipment that we need for the hot mix operation is in very good shape. I mean, there's a few minor little tools here and there that are still in our capital improvement plan for upgrading over the next couple of years. But as a whole, our main equipment is all fairly new.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Otherwise, I'd be willing to entertain a motion to approve the upgrades and repairs as proposed and send it to the county board. Moved by Jeff, second by Virginia. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed, hearing none, motion is carried. Thank you, folks. Okay. Next item, next item on the agenda is the Red River Park Concession Building Addition. This is a proposal coming through the Park and Promotions Committee. Dave is here. There was basically a little plan in the packet of what there's proposed. This is going to be an addition to the building. And it's going to be paid for by, if I'm correct, Dave, the Baseball Association.
Yes,
So it won't cost the county any money. Basically, why they're coming here is because we're the property management, or we control the property of the county. They just want permission to add on to the existing building.
correct.
If you want to comment a little bit on this, Dave, that'd be
Yeah,
great.
absolutely. They're looking to add on, we have a pavilion there right now, so they're looking to add basically, I don't want to say a kitchen, but like a concession area. So it'd be an enclosed building, not very big, a little bit of an overhang that'd be facing the baseball field. With their proposal, this could be used by the general public, like folks who rent that pavilion for personal use, when baseball's not going on as well. So that's helpful to us on the park side. I know some of the conditions there, they had to check into, state permitting and stuff like that, which they have stated that through Wisconsin Building Supply, because of the size of the building, they do not need that. And they'd be buying all the material, taking care of the construction. And yeah, basically doing the upkeep on our end. I'll be working with Mr. Depot to get some kind of a contract with them to make sure things are smooth. And assuming we have approvals of everything, this will be good to go.
Any questions for Dave on this proposed project? Jeff?
What is the oversight in regards to the quality of the construction and the codes?
That would be going through, well, we'd have the contract written to address all those items that came up in our meeting. I know I believe Supervisor Dell's doing a little bit of the work on that, volunteers, some of the siding. Some of these folks, I believe, are contractors. We're kind of waiting to get some answers back on this, but right now they're looking just to get this proposal pushed through so they can start working on some things. Getting some info back to us.
Kind of a nice issue where you can get improvements on our property without costing the county any money.
What is the projected cost of this project, Dave?
I do not have one. I don't believe that, I don't, Gary, if you recall that in the meeting, I don't know if they gave us a proposed cost. Was it around 15? Yeah. So it's not a very large building. Yeah, so under 20,000 for sure. Some of the things that were changed in the committee meeting, they did request that they put on a, steel roofing to match what we have at the park. And then Supervisor Dell had wanted to go with more of a hardboard siding versus vinyl, so it's gonna last longer and not break easily. Those things were all addressed there as well. Yeah, they said that's not required because of the size of the building is small.
It's just amazing to me that over the last 5, 6, 7, 10 years, maybe how much use that park is getting with the rise in Little League girls softball and Little League boys baseball. It's
Yeah.
just amazing how that's growing and how much use that park gets.
Yeah, it's been very busy, especially, well, since COVID, all the park's been busier, but that one especially.
Any other discussion on this topic? Otherwise, basically what we're looking for is a motion from the committee to authorize the Parks and Promotions Committee to move forward with the projected project. Moved by John, seconded by Steve. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, hearing none, motion carried. Thank you, Dave. Okay, next item on the agenda is to go through the monthly financials for January through February and the medical and dental and the overtime reports. I don't know if you're gonna take that, Paul, or?
Yeah. Okay, the monthly financial report would be really light this month because items 9 and 10 are, I guess, a bigger concern or a bigger issue. So sales tax collected, the most recent one was 110,895. That's the first payment that'll count as revenue in 2024. It's down between 2,000 and 3,000 from the year before, but I wouldn't read much into that because it's one payment out of 12 and they vary considerably from month to month and year to year. No contingency requests so far this year, which considering it's only April, that's okay. If there's any questions on the February reports, I'll ask them if there's any specific ones, but being February, there isn't much happening yet. It's only 2 months into the year. Same thing with the medical and dental reports. It's 2 months into the year. We had one high month, one low month, averages out to about 100% of what we're collecting. No news there. And the overtime report, I just want to point out that there were 3 pay periods in March. Most months of the year have 2. So if the numbers are skewed a little bit, that's part of the reason why. What usually comes up is the sheriff's overtime, but again, the same things are happening there. They have retirements and they have filling in shifts. If there are specific questions on those, the sheriff is out of town this week, but he can come to a meeting if you'd like to hear more about that. Any questions on the monthly administrative reports?
Seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, items 9, whoops, sorry.
Are we doing 9 and 10? They're kind of tied together, but 9 is going through the fund balances and the department summaries and the year-end fund balances for 2023, and those kind of tie into item 10 on the agenda, which is a suggestion to distribute some of the surplus funds through to various accounts, which, because we have such a great surplus this year, would be a good time to do this. So if you want to wheel through those, Paul.
Sure. So just as stated, number 9 is where we ended up in 2023. A couple of different reports with some pictures. And number 10 is, okay, here's what we typically do at this point. And as a result of the good year in 2023, there's some requests in number 10. So to start off with, everything in the reports is unaudited. I have every entry that I know of in there. Unaudited means that it's going to go through the audit in May. There could be some entries. The last few years, we've had anywhere from 1 to 3 audit entries at or below $10,000. So it's not a big impact on any of this. So now that I said that out loud, I'm sure that that'll change. I want to also remind you that the highway department, their work is being done right now. So there will be entries in there, the enterprise fund in particular. There's adjustments and closing entries that haven't happened yet. So that one kind of stands off on its own, but the rest of them, everything I know of is in there. And starting with the fund summary, what stands out is the general fund in particular. We'll come back to that because the second report goes into that in more detail. So from a fund summary perspective, the general fund had an incredibly good year. Human services ended up with a $200,000 plus surplus. The highway special revenue fund and enterprise fund isn't done yet, but the special revenue fund had an $80,000+ deficit, and that comes from the winter maintenance. There was quite a bit at the end of the year. I forget what the beginning of the year was. That resulted in a deficit for the roads and bridges fund. Health and dental both had positive years. The dental fund in particular has a very high fund balance and has been pretty good in my time here. Plus, the health fund went up almost $150,000. It is back within the suggested fund balance range. So another good year there. It's been up and down a little bit in the last few years. And the debt service fund, there was an increase there, and that's a result of at this time last year, we transferred 10% of the general fund surplus into the debt service fund. So that's rising. The annual results for the debt service fund, because it's predictable interest and principal payments, there's a little bit of admin fee there where there's a small difference in the annual results from the debt service. So back to the general fund. So if you look at the very first report, the highlighted number, 2.9 million of surplus in the general fund. That's a very high number for a county this size. The last highest number that I saw was about 900,000 from the previous year. Some of that, actually last year, I should say 2022, a good chunk of that was because we had been ramping up for the jail. We knew that there'd be some building expenses and some staffing increases. So rather than wait till the last minute to find it, we built it into the budget so we wouldn't have to scramble when that opens. Now that opening is going to be delayed a bit. But the same scenario is still out there, that there's going to be some increase in operations for the building and then some staffing increases. The exact amount to be determined. The rest of it, a number of things happened this year. Unique to this year, some not so unique, but to start off with, early this year, we had a $518,000 payment from the Village of Luxembourg. They closed out the TIF district, and that was our portion of the remainder. It's a one-time payment. I knew that one was coming up for closure. I had no idea we'd be getting $500,000. Next in line, our sales tax is $323,000 above what we had budgeted. We knew we budget low, but the sales tax has been increasing. You know, as inflation goes up, so does the sales tax. Interest on our savings and both short-term and long-term is $669,000 above. That one stands out. But when I look back at what I calculate an average interest rate for the year for certain entries I have to do. And the average interest rate for 2023 was 5%. The year before was just over 1%. So 4.5% on our savings balance is an enormous difference, and it's reflected in that number right there. Also in that number there's a number that we have to calculate for reporting purpose, external reporting purposes, to gain or loss on investments. So we have some long-term investments that as the market goes up and down, the value of those goes up and down. We have to report that, so we have to track it. But that number will be backed out later because that number will never materialize. We buy and we hold our investments. So unless we sell them, we're not going to see that. So you'll see later on that I back that number out. And then, we're not that close to 2.9 million yet. So I wanted to look through and see what were the other big items. And there's a lot of smaller items. Most of them have to do with vacancies. The biggest one, obviously, again, is the sheriff and the jail. We budgeted to increase our staff there and haven't really kept pace with that. But there were a lot of vacancies in 2023. It takes time to fill them. So when there's a vacancy, maybe we're paying overtime for somebody else, maybe not, but we certainly aren't paying the benefits like we would if there's a full-timer in there. So a lot of small numbers added up to, I didn't add up the number, but between those 6 items, that explains how we got to 2.9 million in 2023 for the general fund. And if you want to see in by department, the second report I sent, the one with the pink shading on, goes through by department and it'll highlight where the bigger differences are. If you have specific questions, I can go through that. But again, the big numbers to add up to that were the 6 or 7 I just previously mentioned. Okay. So the next thing that we look at is the fund balances as of the end of the year. So there's a fund balance report, which is immediately following page here, immediately following the general fund. And the purpose of that report is to calculate and show the health of the fund and the county overall. We have set, I think it was 2017, we set a target fund balance of 25 to 35% for the general fund, and then 15 to 25% for other funds. And this report measures where we end up in 2023, compares it to our target, and is a good indicator of the health of the individual funds as well as the county. This then I'll reference later on when I point out, for example, the general fund at the end of last year was about 62.74%. And again, our target range goes up to 35. If once we close this year, and assuming no other audit entries, we would be at 90.75%. Human services, one of the other big funds, went from about 16 to 17%. They're headed in the right direction. They're within the range of that they need to be self-supportive. And again, a human services fund for most counties struggles. And we've had a number of years in a row where we have a positive result at the end of the year. And that's a very good thing to have. Roads and bridges went down a little bit. Again, winter maintenance was a driving force behind the 88,000 deficit in that one. Enterprise fund still being worked on. And solid waste fund which is the last of what I've labeled as major funds. Solid waste fund is kind of up in the air. We have expenses throughout the year. We request reimbursement from the DNR. We've done that. I sent the report in January. We had a little back and forth discussion about what's in the report and what some of the numbers and some of the work done. And I haven't heard back from them for some time now. So because I have to close the year, I best guessed what I think the DNR will pay us. They don't have to reimburse us. They don't really have to give us anything. They will look at what we spent. They'll look at the long-term care trust and if the trust can afford it or not. And they're still in that process. So if I best guess what we're going to collect, we would have about a $29,000 loss this year. Expenses were up. There was some capital work done out there for the flare system and then some grading to deal with some erosion. I don't expect to get all that back because the trust fund may or may not be able to last for the remaining 40 years if we get all of our expenses up front, but that's up to the DNR. So we'll be coming back to the solid waste fund. And of course, our health and dental insurance funds had an increase this year, and they're well within range of where we'd like them to be. All the other funds are so small that it really has no impact, and there's not there's not a reason to go through them unless you have specific questions. So now that we see we had a good year, we see our fund balances are almost across the board, almost universally at or well above where they need to be. The question is, okay, what can we, what should we, what ought we do? What should we do with it? Unless there's any other questions, I'll move on to number 10.
Are there any specific questions on the summary, 23 summary, the 23 summary of the departments, and then the breakdown of all the funds within the county? Those three reports were in there. There's a lot of stuff in there, I know, but they all look good.
Okay,
Okay, I guess you don't have any specifics on those, Paul. So if you want to go on to item 10, which would be a recommendation from the finance director on how to maybe make use of some of these surplus funds at the time when it would be when we can do it.
okay. So 2023 being a very good year, we finished with positives almost universally. We have fund balances that are at or above where they need to be almost universally. So there's no point really in just allowing everything to build the fund balances when we probably have other needs elsewhere. And the list of items I have in the memo are suggestions and requests where we either in previous years have a policy where we already do this, or there's some specific needs that have been identified that since we have the opportunity, we should take care of those now. The first two are routine for at least for the last few years. We have an excess unspent contingency of 35,755. In previous years, we've had the policy of sending that wherever it needs to go. This year and I believe last year as well. Since the fund balances on their places are where they need to be, the obvious remaining choices would be debt service or future capital projects. We have a jail on the horizon. We probably have a highway project on the horizon and possibly others where if we have the money available, we really should be setting it aside and pointing out to the rest of the board, the taxpayers, future boards, all the employees, we have higher balances. Here's why we're hanging on to this, because we have a future need coming up. We had a policy for the last few years too of taking 10% of the general fund surplus and sending it over to the debt service fund for early debt payment. Again, there's no reason not to do that. So the number is a bit higher this year, obviously. But that would then prevent the need from either issuing more debt or allow us to make debt service payments without an additional levy.
Paul,
Yes.
right here. So we had talked in the past, at least you and I had outside of meetings here and there in regards to like the jail, for example. We knew it's coming up and we had all these years and whatnot, that if we were to be setting aside budgeting every year, so many dollars, at least that would have helped an initial amount of money on the jail, whatever that amount may have turned out to be. So with this surplus going forward, are we gonna specifically earmark then some of these funds for the jail, for the highway shop, and then undesignated?
The last item there, the 1.5 million, I didn't set it aside specifically for the jail or specifically for the highway, but that's exactly the point of it. We know we have big projects, so the board could pick or choose which one, or if there's another project out there, but the big
Is there a
ones-
way though that we could identify it, like you say, for the general public, for future board members, for whatever, that it doesn't get lost in the shuffle that, hey, we were planning.
Oh, yes, there will be an entry from this, so.
Okay.
I don't have it here, but within the fund balance for the general fund, there's assigned, committed, non-spendable, restricted. This is going to be a committed fund balance specifically for future large capital projects. There's already one there for the jail based on the vote that was taken in 2022.
Okay.
That one says specifically for the jail, and that ties out to at the time, what was going to be 21 million of debt and the other sources. So those other sources are going to be in there because that's what was voted on. Even though the jail didn't happen, that's still happening.
Okay.
This one would be like one line below it for projects. If you want to specify, today or during the board meeting for the jail, for the highway, or for anything else, absolutely we can do it. I don't have a suggestion either which project, because you say for one versus the other, to me, it doesn't matter. And I don't think we really know with the timing, which one's gonna come first anymore. So having it for large projects doesn't back you into the corner, but it also serves the purpose of we're saving for this point and demonstrating that. And yes, it will be in our financial statements. It'll be on the bottom of the balance sheet. I can pull out the our audit and show you where it would appear in the audit as well. Starting in 24.
Just a comment, if, even if the 1.5 goes to, say, what do we have here? Large projects, the board could always say, well, we want to take some of that money and designate it specifically for the jail and move it to that account, or specifically move it to the highway, spend it on the highway department. That could always be done at a future date. So we're not really tying ourselves to the in a corner, other than the fact that we're saying this is money that's going to be spent on future large projects. So,
Actually, everything coming out of there would have to go through the board. So like anything budgeted. So any project where this would be used would have to go through the board, either at standalone resolution or at budget time. Two other items that were, I guess, either recently or have been on the horizon for a little bit. The solid waste fund. See, we've been closed since 2019. At the time of closure, the question was asked to the DNR, how much money do we have to have in the long-term care fund? I was anticipating we'd have to put an additional amount in there. The DNR who oversees that said, no, here's the calculation, you have enough in there. And if you recall, at the time when we closed, or when we ceased operations and did the cleanup, so to speak, of the solid waste fund, we left $100,000 in there just in case expenses would be over the amount they reimbursed us. 4 years into it, every year actually has been a little higher than the calculated amount we'd be taking out of there. Some of that was planned. Leachate in the first few years is absolutely going to be higher. And then some of it happens here and there as equipment needs to be replaced. The gas flare, for example, that's not an every year thing. However, when I look back at the last 4 years, $100,000 isn't going to be enough. Like I said, I don't know what the DNR is going to reimburse us for 2023, but this is going to be an issue for the next couple of years anyway. So I guess that an additional $500,000 in there would get us through the foreseeable future and not have to worry about that fund balance going negative, and then come up with the possibility of having to either levy for that or transfer from somewhere else. And then the last item, last year at this time, the previous administrator requested 75,000 again be set aside for a payroll, financial or HR system. I'm not sure where the 75,000 came from. I do know that my best guess a few years ago, well, it was a high guess, for just a financial system was about 200 to 250,000. I don't know what an HR system would cost. 75,000 set aside is a good start. It's not going to be enough to cover it, whatever that number may be. So since we have the money this year, I would propose adding another 175 to get us up to the 250. As far as what that is and when it's replaced, I can tell you the system isn't going to last forever. It's from 1992. I don't believe there are people scrambling to get onto the system. And while I don't have an immediate need for it, I don't want to be the last one jumping off a sinking ship either. Because at that point, it becomes awfully hard to switch when you're in a hurry and you have to do it quickly. I want to be able to replace that when the time comes without being backed into a corner and doing it under the gun when it's an emergency because we can't get any support or we're the last customer there. Adding the 175 would make it 250, and I think that's a reasonable best guess. My guess was a few years ago. I guessed a little high, but we've seen inflation in the last few years, so I don't know exactly what that's going to be. I've come across a few vendors. I have a list of potential systems. I don't have prices with them yet. The first thing I'd have to do is say, okay, what do we need versus what do we want? What's available? And then find something, and then we'd be able to attach a cost to that. That's not going to happen in the next couple of years. So I have one big memo with 5 different requests or recommendations. I guess we could either vote on them all at once. We could take them one by one, change things as presented, or whatever the committee would like to see. Any questions? Okay, the very last page I have on there is how I calculated the surplus. Again, there's some items that we don't want to count twice or just shouldn't be counted in there. And that's just a demonstration of how we got from 2.9 down to 2.5. And I don't have to walk through that unless somebody wants to, has questions on that.
Does anyone have any specific questions on any of the individual items that Paul is proposing to be taken out of the surplus funds and set up in special accounts? They all make pretty much good sense to me. And if without objection, I would, if there's no other discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve the entire request and send this to the county board. When it goes to the board, this would have to go to the board as an amendment to the 2024 budget, because we're actually changing the 2024 budget.
And for transfers that happen between funds, the board would have to approve that. Again, either by a standalone resolution like this or as a part of the budget.
So your motion is to approve the proposed by the finance director and send it to the county board. Moved by John, second by Virginia. Any discussion on the proposal, on the motion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed, hearing none, motion carried. Thank you, Paul. It would be nice to have a surplus like this every year, but anyway, moving on. So Dave, is this going to be coming? Will there be a resolution? My other question is, should we have this on the agenda for the April 11th special meeting? Or should we wait until the May meeting when the new board is organized? Okay, that was just a question. Okay, we'll put this on the May agenda for board approval. Thank you, everyone. Okay, the vendor payments were online. If you had a chance to look at them, are there any questions on the vendor payments that you might want to ask, Paul? Okay, seeing none, the supplemental payroll has been circulating. I would entertain a motion to approve the supplemental payroll. Moved by Jeff, second by Virginia. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Motion carried. Are there any other matters that should come before the board? Gary?
I just have one question for the April 11th special county board meeting. Will there be a resolution coming to the board for those asphalt improvements? In a form of a resolution? Pardon? Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all I need. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything to come before the committee? Seeing none, our next meeting date is, if we continue on as we always have in the past, we'll be meeting on the first Friday of May, which would be May 3rd, 8:30. I mean, 8 o'clock, sorry. I wrote 8:30 on my notes for some reason.
Just seeing if everybody's listening.
Pardon?
Just seeing if everybody's listening.
Yeah, good catch there. If there's nothing else, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Steve, seconded by Virginia to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. Motion is carried. We are adjourned.